Hey guys, I'm here with another tasting. I've got a bottle of Kilbrin's Irish whiskey. It was something I picked up at Total Wine and More. I had to do just a little bit of research, and it does look like this is something that is packaged in some form for Total Wine and More, the specific store. So I couldn't pull up Kilbrin's website to be able to get more information. I was in the mood for something a little bit closer to Bushmills. I wanted just a clean Irish whiskey. At that moment, I didn't want a Scotch. I was looking for something a little bit more simple, something I could have a beer after. I think this satisfied. I was very, very happy with this bottle. Friends helped me polish some of it off. Bushmills is one of the whiskeys that I will buy regularly. I just like having it on hand. It's just a good all-purpose, I think, clean. One of the things I've noticed about Irish whiskeys is I sometimes like having the non-peated, non-Scotch flavors. I just want a good whiskey. I don't want to worry about a bourbon and sour mash. I don't want to worry about Scotch and like peat flavors and aromas and all the other botanical compounds. I just want a good whiskey. Irish whiskey, if you're starting out, stuff like Bushmills, and I think even this bottle, I think is a really good starting place. If you're trying to find your palate, you're trying to find something that you like, I think this is probably a good choice along with Bushmills. With that being said, let's go ahead and pour some. Let's see how this is. Doing actual tasting notes this time. I really liked the simplicity of the bottle. I don't know about storing whiskey for long term. I know that you don't want to put it on its side because it's not like wine. It's got such a high alcohol content. That and tequila, it'll eat the cork. So it's something that you'll want to have right side up. I don't know if, I know most alcohol, you'll want to keep it in a dark space, dark and cool generally. You don't want to expose it to heat or light. I don't know if, unlike Heineken, this green bottle, when you got a Heineken beer, beer does better. It doesn't oxidize as much when it's in a brown bottle. For whiskey, I'm not sure if that makes a difference or not. If you know, go ahead and write below and let me know. Very, very clean. I get a little bit of oak on the nose, that little alcohol flush up front. Very mature. I don't get a sense of, I don't know, it makes me think of rot gut, something that's cheap. This, even though I think it was fairly affordable, I think it was less than $30. I was very impressed with this bottle. I think this is one I'd likely buy again, just like I talk about with Bushmills. See if I can get that up close, get you a view of that. There we go. Using a clear glass, you can see it's got a nice color there, kind of like this wood grain. A lot of those compounds, I'm told, are being pulled from the oak cask. I don't know if whiskey has some of the same liquor laws in relations to tequila, but with tequila, they can add 1% additives. That's something I'm going to go into in great detail as I learn a little bit more. I was very frustrated to find out that some of the aromas and things I was picking up from tequila were probably from the additives and not from the bottle itself. Whiskey laws, not as familiar. It almost makes me think a little, if you're a Scotch fan, Glenlivet. The Glenlivet 12 year, I think, is a kind of a benchmark for Scotch drinkers. If you were going to start with a Scotch, that Highland Scotch, Glenlivet really works. I think this reminds me of that as far as its flavors and aromas. It doesn't have the same, I think, depth as a Scotch, but it's very good, the aroma and smell. It's deep, full, rich. Usually with whiskeys, one of the things I notice is if I spend more time smelling it than I do drinking it. For a Scotch in particular, that's a really high benchmark because the flavor compounds are so nuanced. It's like I want to sit and just keep inhaling that aroma because I find it mesmerizing. Lafroig, a very peated Scotch, is one that I do that with. It was one of the first really heavily peated Scotches I tried. and it's an acquired taste, I think, for many people, but it's a sort of thing where in the winter, I really prefer whiskey and scotch, and I would just sit there for long amounts of time, just letting my nose, just sinus passages, pick up the oak and peat off of that scotch. This is kind of like, reminds me of being somewhere in between Bushmills and that Glenlivet. That's what it makes me think of. That's the stuff that's coming to mind, and that may be because I haven't developed my palate enough. I haven't developed my sense of taste well enough to know what the difference is, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. And let's have a taste. Wheat, lightly. That makes me think of, in terminology, the heather. It's aromatic. It's a cask. Everything about this, in addition to a good Guinness, is what I want to have in a pub because it's a sunblock of my people. Wonderful flavors. When I said it was sweet, it's aromatic. It's not like sugar. It's got some higher notes in its profile. The nose very oaky, but it's not overwhelming. It also seems fairly balanced, clean, maybe just a little bit crisp. It's viscous. It's got a density, almost a little bit of syrupiness to it. Its viscosity, it lingers on my tongue. It was like it spread across my palate. I use a neti, do a lot of yoga, opens up your lungs so you can take that all in, put it across your sinus passages. It's good. Just a very clean. I think it's a benchmark example of an Irish whiskey. I'd have to dig more within Irish whiskey to see what's available. Also, when you're dealing with this, you have to understand that likely people in Ireland are drinking certain things that aren't even necessarily imported into the United States. A Guinness, for instance, I'm told, just is not the same unless you're in Ireland. It's just not the same drink, not the same beer, and I've heard that for several beers that are imported. This is much like Bushmills, the same ethic, the same sort of ethos. It makes me want to have this and then a beer after to chase it. Makes me think of straw. A. I can see the Irish countryside. What it makes me think of. Imagery. It's one of the things I really love about certain liquors, beers. Does it transport me somehow to another place, another time? I'm not a huge, as of yet, bourbon fan. Bourbon, the sour mash flavor is a little more acquired. I do have a bottle of bourbon that I'm going to show and then continue to kind of explore within a range. I did find that I liked bourbon a little bit more once I had something other than Jim Beam or, Jack Daniels. There's a little bit of that syrupy after you get through the heather, after you get through that floral notes, the the stuff that hits your palates first, there is a little bit of bitter, a little bit of something on the backside, but I feel like it's so balanced with all of the other components of the flavor compound, the flavor profile, just a very balanced whiskey. I can't imagine what a connoisseur would say, but I think this is an excellent purchase. This is a little bit more nuanced than, say, Bushmills to me. I can't say whether I would choose this over the other. It would kind of just depend on my mood. But overall, I think this is a great whiskey. I think again, if you were interested in trying something to kind of get started, I think Bushmills and then this is probably a good choice. Some spiciness to it. Again, it's like I can see the land, the like rolling green hills and the sheep in the countryside. And these are just images that are thrown into my head when I drink this, partially based off what I've seen in photos or in film. But when I'm transported somewhere because of the drink, that's a bonus to me. I like being reminded of a certain culture, a place, and a time based on the liquor itself. Floral aromas, maybe a little bit of like aged honey, raw honey, not something that's pasteurized and bottled. Clover. It's really interesting to develop my nose and feel comfortable using terminology, knowing I might not be getting some of it perfectly correct. But just a great whiskey. Cheers. Thanks to Total Wine and More for producing this. I think this is a great bottle. Really impressed with this. I think it's an excellent, excellent choice if you want Bushmills. It's full, robust. If I was trying to walk someone along, if we had Bushmills, then we had this, and then they had, is it Dewar's or Dewar's Scotch, the white label, the blended Scotch. I could see walking somebody along in flavor profile from Bushmills to this to Dewar's. To like walk them along in complexity to something until we eventually got them to like Lefroy, something that was very peated. This is, I think, well worth the purchase. You guys check this out. I could see easily taking shots with this as I could drinking it on its own. I, of course, drank it neat just because I was getting the flavor there. But if you have any feedback, criticism, you have another whiskey that you'd really like me to try that you think is a must-have, just comment down below and let me know. I'll be interested to try more and see if we can develop more tasting notes, more of a palate for what I like and what I don't like. You guys have a great day, and thank you again for tuning in. Salud.